The Detroit Pistons are the best team in the Eastern Conference right now. Yes, you heard that right. The same Pistons who were historically awful just 2 seasons ago are now sitting at the top of the East with a 28-10 record, and they're making it look easy. Meanwhile, the Milwaukee Bucks, a team that was supposed to contend for a championship with Giannis Antetokounmpo, are an absolute train wreck, sitting at 22nd in net rating and getting blown out by 30 points to teams missing their best players. The Sacramento Kings, who were supposed to have one of the league's most explosive offenses, are somehow dead last in offensive rating. And don't even get me started on what's happening in Dallas, with Anthony Davis's injury situation completely derailing their season. If you thought you knew how this NBA season would play out, think again. We're officially at the midpoint of the 2026 NBA season, and it's time to hand out report cards to all 30 teams. But here's the thing. This isn't just about wins and losses. I'm grading teams based on expectations, injuries, development, and whether they're actually building towards something meaningful or just wasting everyone's time. Some teams with losing records are getting A's today, while some playoff teams are getting F's, and I'm going to explain exactly why. The trade deadline is right around the corner, All-Star break is here, and the second half of the season is about to get wild. So buckle up, because we're about to break down every single team's performance so far. And trust me, some of these grades are going to shock you. Let's get into it. Before we dive into grading all 30 teams, let me explain exactly how this grading system works, because context is everything. I'm not just looking at whether a team has 30 wins or 15 wins. I'm evaluating them against their preseason expectations, their injury situations, how their young players are developing, and whether their current trajectory makes any sense for their future. A team that was expected to win 25 games and is on pace for exactly that might get a C, while a team expected to contend for a championship but struggling to stay above 500 could easily land in the F tier. I'm also considering trades, coaching changes, and whether teams are actually making smart decisions or just spinning their wheels in mediocrity. This is about the full picture of how each franchise is operating right now. I'm using a simple A, B, C, D, and F grading scale. No plus or minus signs to overcomplicate things. The A tier is reserved for teams that are genuinely exceeding expectations or performing at an elite level. B tier is for solid performers who are doing what they were supposed to do. C is for teams meeting modest expectations or treading water. D is for underachievers who had higher hopes, and F is for complete disasters where everything has gone wrong. Some of these grades might make you angry, especially if I'm harsh on your favorite team, but that's exactly why I need you to let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you're enjoying this breakdown so far, do me a huge favor. Smash that like button, drop a comment with your team, and subscribe if you haven't already, because we've got a lot of NBA content coming your way. Now, let's start handing out these grades and see where your team lands. Let's start with the cream of the crop, the teams that have absolutely earned their A grades this season. First up, the Detroit Pistons. And this is the easiest A I'm giving out today. The Pistons are 28-10, leading the Eastern Conference. And they're not just winning games, they're dominating with the second-best defensive rating in the league. Cade Cunningham is going to be an all-star starter, Jalen Duren has broken out at center, and they're getting incredible contributions from Ausar Thompson, Ron Holland, and the most underrated defender in basketball, Isaiah Stewart. Most people had Detroit in that 4 to 7 seed range before the season, maybe sneaking into the second round if everything went perfectly. Instead, they look like legitimate Eastern Conference Finals contenders, and they're doing it with an exciting, hard-nosed style that makes them must-watch television every single night. The Phoenix Suns are another team getting an A, and honestly, I didn't see this coming at all. I thought Phoenix would lose 50-plus games this season after sending away Kevin Durant. But here they are at 24-16 in a brutal Western Conference with the 8th best defensive rating in the league. Mike Budenholzer has completely transformed this team's identity. They actually play defense now, which feels like a minor miracle. Colin Jespoli looks like a legitimate breakout player. Dylan Brooks has been fantastic. And they've done all this with Devin Booker carrying the offensive load and Jalen Green having barely played. Then you've got the San Antonio Spurs earning an A by going 27-13 with Victor Wembanyama looking like a top 5 player in the sport. They beat Oklahoma City 3 times, they're 3rd in defensive rating, and Wemby would easily be Defensive Player of the Year if he hits the games threshold. The Denver Nuggets get an A with Nikola Jokic playing MVP-level basketball again and Peyton Watson emerging as a potential most improved player candidate. And I'm throwing the Minnesota Timberwolves in here too. They're the #1 team in net rating and point differential for January, with Anthony Edwards playing like a first-team All-NBA guy and Rudy Gobert potentially winning another Defensive Player of the Year award. Now let's talk about the B tier. Teams that are doing exactly what they were supposed to do or slightly exceeding reasonable expectations. The Philadelphia 76ers absolutely belong here, and honestly, I could see myself bumping them up to an A by season's end. They're 22-16 right now, and when you actually watch the minutes where Joel Embiid, VJ Edgecombe, and Tyrese Maxey are all on the court together, they look like one of the best teams in the Eastern Conference. Embiid looks healthy and dominant again, which alone should have Sixers fans celebrating in the streets. VJ Edgecombe has been a revelation as a rookie. Maxey is playing like a top 12 player in the league, and this is a team that most people thought would finish around 500. The fact that they're above that mark at the midway point with room to grow is genuinely impressive. And if they can get Paul George healthy for a legitimate playoff run, watch out. The Houston Rockets get a B grade, even though they've cooled off recently after that scorching hot start. They're still 23-14 in the tough Western Conference, with the second-best net rating in the league, and that's incredibly impressive. Reed Shepherd has shown real promise, Kevin Durant has been everything they needed him to be, and they're still elite on both ends of the floor, despite some bad losses to Sacramento and Portland lately. The Toronto Raptors also earn a B. They're the 4th seed in the East at 24-17, 6th in defensive rating, and they're doing this with injuries to Jakob Poeltl and some roster limitations at center. Scotty Barnes and RJ Barrett have stepped up big time, and this team is proving they're legitimate playoff contenders. I'm also putting the Charlotte Hornets in B tier because they've been genuinely fun to watch and way better than anyone expected. LaMelo Ball, Brandon Miller, and rookie standout Cooper Flagg have given them a top 10 offense, and they're exceeding every expectation people had for them coming into this season. The C tier is where we find teams that are pretty much exactly where we thought they'd be. No major surprises in either direction. The Washington Wizards are a perfect example of a C-grade season. They're 10-28, sitting 14th in the Eastern Conference, and that's precisely what everyone expected from a young, rebuilding team that didn't want to risk losing their top 8 protected pick to the Knicks. They just traded for Trae Young, though he probably won't play much this season, and they've gotten some nice development from Alex Sarr and Corey Kispert. Nobody expected them to make the playoffs. They're not making the playoffs, and they're getting valuable experience for their young core. Mission accomplished, essentially. It's boring, but it's exactly the plan. The Brooklyn Nets also land in C tier, and they might actually deserve a bump to B when this is all said and done. They're getting good development from Diego Dortmund, who looks like a top 10 rookie and is shooting 39% from 3, which is fantastic. Drake Powell and Denny Wolfe have shown flashes, and here's the kicker. They might actually get a solid return from Michael Porter Jr. at the trade deadline. 3 months ago, everyone thought MPJ was an untradeable negative contract at $40 million per year. But now, teams are interested, and Brooklyn could land a young player plus draft capital. The Portland Trail Blazers get a C as well, because when you factor in all the injuries they've dealt with, Damian Lillard out for the season, Scoot Henderson missing the entire year with a hamstring issue, and a laundry list of other guys missing time, being the 9th seed is actually pretty reasonable. The Miami Heat round out this tier at 21-19, playing solid defense and getting borderline all-star production from Norman Powell, who they got for free. They're pretty much right where most realistic projections had them. The D tier is where things start getting uncomfortable. These are teams that had legitimate playoff aspirations, or at least higher expectations, but they're falling short in significant ways. The Cleveland Cavaliers are a prime example, and this might shock people given that they're still above 500. But hear me out. Last year, this team went 64-18 and lost only 18 games all season long. This year, they're already at 22-19 at the midpoint, which means they've already lost more games than they did in all of last year. Their defense has regressed from elite to merely average, their offense isn't the juggernaut it was, and they just don't look like the same dominant force. Max Strus hasn't played a single game this year, and maybe he was the secret ingredient keeping everything together. Evan Mobley hasn't taken the leap we expected in year 5, and those 3 guard lineups with Craig Porter Jr., Donovan Mitchell, and Darius Garland aren't working. They're still a good team, but they've gone from odds-on favorite in the East to just another solid playoff squad. The Chicago Bulls also get a D, but for completely different reasons. They're actually too good for their own benefit. The Bulls should not be trying to make the play-in tournament right now. They need to be bottoming out, getting a top 10 pick in this loaded draft class, and building around Josh Giddey and Modest Buzelis for the future. Instead, they're playing competitive basketball, getting fun performances from Trey Jones, and generally hovering around mediocrity, which is the worst place to be in the NBA. The Memphis Grizzlies join them in D tier because this season has been genuinely weird. They're 17-22, and now there are actual reports that they're open to trading Ja Morant for the first time ever. Ja has been pretty bad when healthy, shooting 40% from the field and 20% from 3 while missing 20-plus games again. Zach Edey looked great before injuries hit, and they've gotten solid contributions from guys like Cam Spencer and Jalen Wells, but the vibes are just off. The LA Clippers round out this tier. They started 6-21, which was borderline catastrophic, and even though they've gone 10-2 in their last 12 games, that slow start probably cost them a higher seed and any realistic championship hopes.
Now we're getting into the really painful territory, the F tier, where seasons have completely fallen apart, and franchises are facing serious questions about their future. Let's start with the Milwaukee Bucks, who might be the most disappointing team in the entire league relative to expectations. They're sitting at 22nd in net rating. They're horrible when Giannis Antetokounmpo is on the court, and they just lost by 30 points to a Minnesota Timberwolves team that was missing both Anthony Edwards and Rudy Gobert. The Bucks didn't have Miles Turner in that game either, but come on, you're at home, you have a former MVP, and you get obliterated. I genuinely think Milwaukee should be sellers at the deadline and trade Giannis, which I know sounds insane, but they are so far away from contention right now. If they trade for mid-tier players like Miles Bridges or Jerami Grant at the deadline, I'd be even more upset, because that's just delaying the inevitable rebuild they desperately need. The Indiana Pacers join them in F tier with a 9-31 record, tied for the worst in the league. With no Tyrese Halliburton all season, they knew they weren't contending, but did anyone think they'd be this historically bad? They're just hoping to land A.J. Dybinsa or Dylan Harper in the draft at this point. The New Orleans Pelicans round out this tier with the actual worst record in the league, and the kicker is they don't even own their first-round pick. They fired Willie Green after starting 2-10, and while I like James Mosley as the long-term coach, this season is a complete wash for a team that desperately needed to be competitive.
Let me hit you with one more F-tier team that deserves special attention, the Sacramento Kings, who might actually be the biggest disaster of all when you consider what was supposed to happen this season. The Kings are 29th in net rating, which is bad enough, but here's what really blows my mind. They're dead last, 30th in the entire NBA in offensive rating. This was supposed to be their bread and butter, their identity, the one thing they could always hang their hat on. Domantas Sabonis has been hurt, Keegan Murray has missed time, but why is 37-year-old Russell Westbrook somehow your best player right now? DeMar DeRozan tries hard every night, Zach LaVine mostly shows up offensively, but the defense is non-existent and the whole operation feels broken. I thought Sacramento could sneak into the play-in tournament and win maybe 40 games this year. Instead, they're looking at a top 10 lottery pick, which honestly might be the best thing for their future. The silver lining for Sacramento is that they actually own their pick, unlike some other disasters on this list. I expect them to sell off Malik Monk, Dennis Schroeder, DeMar DeRozan, and anyone else they can find takers for at the deadline. Zach LaVine and Sabonis might draw interest if teams think they can salvage value there. The young pieces like Devin Carter and Keegan Murray long-term are still worth building around. But Doug Christie hasn't impressed me as a head coach, and this roster construction just doesn't make sense. When you're worse offensively than the rebuilding teams actively trying to lose games, something is fundamentally broken. The Kings went from playoff team to complete mess in one offseason, and while tanking might not have been the plan, it's definitely become the reality. At least they'll have a chance at a franchise-altering player in what's supposed to be an excellent draft class. Before we wrap this up, I want to highlight a few teams that didn't quite make the A tier, but deserve recognition for exceeding expectations in meaningful ways. The Boston Celtics are sitting at 24-15 without Jason Tatum, who might not even return this season, and they're still the second-best offensive team in the entire league. Think about that for a second. They're the number 2 offense without a top 5 player on the roster. Jaylen Brown has been absolutely phenomenal as the number 1 option, stepping into that role seamlessly and proving he can carry a team. They're getting great defensive contributions from Jordan Walsh and Hugo Gonzalez off the bench. Derek White and Peyton Pritchard found their rhythm after slow starts, and they could realistically end up as the 2 seed in the East with just rotational centers manning the 5 spot. That's coaching, that's depth, and that's a winning culture. The Golden State Warriors are another interesting case that I threw in the C tier, but they're playing better than their 22-19 record suggests in some ways. They're 10th in net rating, 7th in defensive rating, and Stephen Curry is still playing at an honest-to-God MVP caliber level at his age, which is remarkable. The big question mark is the Jonathan Kuminga situation and whether he gets traded by the time you're watching this video, because they desperately need that secondary shot creator next to Steph. DeAnthony Melton has given them some solid minutes lately, Moses Moody has been inconsistent but still shoots it well from 3, and Will Richard has massively exceeded expectations for a 56th overall pick in the 2025 draft. I didn't love the Warriors as a top 5 seed coming into the year. I had them somewhere in that 6 through 9 range, and that's pretty much exactly where they are right now. They're not exciting or disappointing, they're just solid and trying to maximize whatever time Curry has left at an elite level. So there you have it, my complete mid-season report card for all 30 NBA teams as we hit the All-Star break and approach the trade deadline. We've got 7 teams in the A tier who are genuinely exceeding expectations or playing elite basketball, a handful of solid B tier performers doing what they're supposed to do, some C tier teams treading water exactly where we thought they'd be, and then the disappointing D and F tiers where seasons have gone sideways or completely off the rails. The thing that stands out most to me is how unpredictable this season has been. Nobody saw Detroit becoming the best team in the East. Nobody predicted Phoenix would be a legitimate playoff threat after trading Durant. And I don't think anyone could have predicted just how badly Milwaukee and Sacramento would collapse. The second half of the season is going to be absolutely fascinating because we've got trade deadline moves coming, teams trying to salvage their seasons, and young players continuing to develop. Now, I want to hear from you. Do you agree or disagree with any of these grades, especially for your favorite team? Did I go too hard on Milwaukee or too easy on the Knicks? Should the Celtics be in the A tier instead of staying in B? Let me know in the comments below because I genuinely want to hear your perspective and have that discussion. And if you enjoyed this mid-season breakdown and want to see more NBA content like this, team breakdowns, trade deadline analysis, draft coverage, playoff predictions, make sure you smash that like button right now. It genuinely helps the channel grow. Subscribe if you haven't already so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos, and turn on notifications so you're first to know when we drop new content. Drop a comment with your team's name and what grade you think they deserve, and let's have a real conversation about where this season is headed. I'll catch you in the next video, and until then, enjoy the second half of the NBA season. Peace!